Hello everyone, I'm back with another Joust tier list. This one is about assassins specifically. Just like my support tier list, just like my warrior tier list, I'm ranking these assassins on their kit as a whole and the criteria that I think are important, and if their kits meet those criteria and how well they meet that criteria. This is not item specific, this is not meta specific, map specific, so this tier list should be pretty future proof as time goes on. But like I said, I'm going to be ranking them on these specific criteria, and those criteria are as follows. So these are the criteria I'm using to judge assassins: initiation, crowd control, damage, flexibility, survivability, and team fight. I'm going to give each of those a score from 0 to 5, and all of those scores added up are going to add to their total score from 0 to 30. Then once I have that total score, depending on what their score is, they're going to be put into tiers based on those scores. So I have a D tier, which is 0 to 12. These are gods that you don't want to pick really at all. They just don't work very well in Joust because of their kit. C, 13 to 15. Underperforming gods, you have to build a comp around these gods specifically. They're not going to work in most situations. B, these gods perform okay. They can work in almost any situation, but they're not going to excel by any means. A, higher performing gods, their kits allow them to do more, to just be overall more effective in Joust. You can somewhat prioritize these gods. And then S, 22 plus, these are the gods that you want to either ban or plan on picking because they can end up carrying a game because they're just that good. Their kit works so well in the Joust game mode. Before we hop into the rankings, if you guys don't know, I also have a Twitch, and I'm doing a giveaway right now. My first 100 Twitch followers will be put into a drawing. One lucky follower is going to get $60 worth of video games, whether that's one video game, 5, 10, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to do something to say thank you to you guys. And if you don't want to follow me on Twitch, you can also feel free to subscribe here on YouTube, and that helps me as well. But enough self-promo, let's get into these rankings. We're going alphabetically. The first assassin on our list is Arachne. Her initiation, I gave her a 2 out of 5. She does have her 3. She can put broodlings on the enemy from a somewhat far distance, but the only other initiation tool is her ultimate, and if she ults in, she really has no way to get out, so that's not very effective. Crowd control, I also gave her a 2 out of 5. She does have slows and a stun built into her kit, but you have to be pretty close range to get those things off, and it's just kind of tough to do in a 3v3 game mode when everybody's all bunched up. Damage, she also gets a 3 out of 5. She can do a lot of damage, but again in Joust, because it's 3v3, she usually can't get that damage off effectively before being interrupted. Flexibility, she gets a 1 out of 5. She really kind of has to be that one shot, all in, I'm doing all the damage to one person god, so her itemization can't really be flexed at all. Survivability, she gets a 2 out of 5. The only way she gets out of any sort of CC or fights is with her ultimate, and that's not necessarily how you want to use an assassin in Joust. Team fight, she gets a 2 out of 5. Again, everything that she has is kind of one-on-one damage, and it doesn't really bring that much to a team scenario. So for all of those reasons, for all of those scores put together, she gets a 12 out of 30, and that means that Arachne is squarely in the D tier of our assassins. The next assassin on our list is Awilix. I gave Awilix a 2 out of 5 in initiation because she does have some good initiation tools, technically, but they're very niche to use. So her 3 she can initiate with, but the enemy has to be running away or from the side, and in Joust they're kind of always facing you. Her Suku she can jump in on, but then she has her movement ability down, and then her ultimate she can also initiate with, but again the enemy has to be knocked up or leaping. So okay initiation tools, but very rare that you can use them effectively, which is why I gave her a 2. Crowd control, however, I gave her a 4 out of 5. She has a root and a cripple on her 2. She has a knockup which can't be DR'd on her 3. All really valuable forms of CC, and like I said before, her ultimate, being able to pull somebody out of a leap or out of a knockup and isolate them, is super valuable. Damage, she gets a 4 out of 5. She can 100 to 0 a squishy pretty easily if she hits everything on them, so for that reason I gave her a 4. Flexibility, I gave her a 2 out of 5. She wants to be that full damage assassin, 100 to 0ing squishies. She does not work that well in a bruiser role. Survivability, I gave her a 3 out of 5. She does have the root cripple if she needs to stop somebody from chasing, and she also has Suku that she can hop on, get some movement speed, and jump over a wall if she's in trouble. So she can survive fairly easily in most situations. Team fight, I gave her a 3 out of 5. That's because of her ultimate, and her kit in general allows her to really isolate one person away from the enemy team and can let your team follow up in a 3 versus 1 situation where somebody's completely out of position compared to what they would have been before without the Awilix fight. So for all of these reasons, I gave Awilix a 18 out of 30, which puts her right in the B tier. Our next assassin on the list is Bakasura. Bakasura, I gave a 3 out of 5 for initiation. He does have a leap that he can use to start a fight, and his ultimate is a pretty effective fight starting tool with the abilities that he has on that, so he's decent at starting those fights. 3 out of 5. Crowd control, he gets a 1 out of 5. The only CC he has built into his kit is on his ultimate. That's up every minute and a half or so, and it's a fairly small, slow, and cripple field, so really lacks crowd control, which hurts in the Joust game mode. Damage, he does get a 4 out of 5. He can burst somebody down really quickly, has true damage in his kit, has a cripple so they can't get away in his kit, has movement speed and attack speed buffs in his kit so he can really burst somebody down really quickly. Flexibility, he gets a 2 out of 5, same as kind of the previous section. He has to build that full damage build to really use his kit effectively, and there's really nothing else that you can do to make him that effective. Survivability, he does get a 3 out of 5. He has a leap that can jump over walls and run away if he needs to. He has a CC immune ult that he can use if he needs to survive, and he has some movement speed stims in some dire situations too. He gets 2 out of 5 in team fight. His cripple field is very small. That's really the only team related aspect he has in his kit. He can't necessarily lock anybody down or put anybody out of position. He just has to attack and auto attack. So for those reasons, I gave him a 15 out of 30, which puts him in our C tier. Bastet is our next assassin on the list, and this one is pretty interesting because she just got a kit rework. I'm filming this in patch 8.12, so this is Bastet's brand new kit that I'm evaluating. I gave her a 4 out of 5 in initiation. Her pounce is a very good initiation by itself. She also has a root, a long range root on her 3 if she can hit that. And now the ultimate is a skill shot that basically acts as a deployable Fenrir ult, which is an insanely good initiation tool. So 4 out of 5 for her. Crowd control, she gets a 3 out of 5. She does have pretty good forms of crowd control with the root. Not that easy to hit and also can be dashed out of. She has a vortex and a pull / grab in her ultimate. So really good forms of CC, but not that easy to hit all of them. Damage, she gets a 4 out of 5. She has really good burst damage if she builds that way. She can also have very good poke damage. So any way that you want to use her, she can have a good amount of damage on her kit. Flexibility, she gets a 3 out of 5. Just as I talked about before, no matter how you build her, she's going to be effective. She can be a crowd control god. She can be a jump in, burst, jump out god. She does have a very large degree of flexibility built into her kit now. Survivability also gets a 4 out of 5. Her dash, her pounce is probably one of the easiest ways to hop in and out of a fight in the entire game. She has a root if she needs to stop somebody from chasing, and her ultimate is CC immune, so she can get away that way if she really needs to. And lifesteal also built into her new passive, so just a lot of ways that she's able to survive in Joust. Team fight, she gets a 3 out of 5 now. She can pull somebody out of position, she can poke somebody out and have them not in the fight at all. So team fight, she's really good, gets a 3 out of 5. All of these scores put together give Bastet a 21 out of 30, which puts her in our A tier. The next assassin we'll be going over today is Camazotz. Camazotz, I gave an initiation of 3 out of 5. He has a couple long range poke abilities that allow him to poke out the enemies. He then can initiate with either his 3 or his ultimate if he wants to, so a ton of ways that he can initiate those fights. Crowd control, he gets a 1 out of 5. The only real crowd control he has in his entire kit is a 30% slow, which is a fairly insignificant amount of CC in the Joust game mode. Damage, he gets a 5 out of 5, however. Ton of damage output. Like I said before, he can poke with his 1 and 2. He can swoop in. He deals more damage per enemy hit. Joust, usually the enemies are going to be all grouped up, so it's easier for him to do that. He does a ton of damage in Joust. Flexibility, he gets a 4 out of 5 because of the amount of lifesteal in his kit. You can build him full damage. You can build him a little bit tanky. He does enough damage to build tanky and is still good in team fights there. So he has a ton of ways that he can be used in Joust. Survivability, he gets a 4 out of 5. Ton of lifesteal built in. CC immune alt, leaps over walls. He can get in and out of fights kind of whenever he wants to. And then team fight, I gave him a 3 out of 5 just for the pure damage output and chaos that he can bring into a fight. In his Bat Out of Hell, he's just diving on backlines. The backline doesn't know who to target. They're trying to survive. And it can really bring a lot to a fight in terms of just pure distraction and damage. So for all of those reasons, I gave Camazotz a 20 out of 30, which puts him in our A tier. Next up is Cliodhna. She is the newest assassin added to the Smite roster. I gave her a 4 out of 5 in initiation. She has the very unique ability that she can go into walls, so the surprise factor is probably at an all-time high, maybe only like Loki, but people know how to play against Loki more so at this point. So initiation, she can definitely jump out of walls at you. She has her ultimate, which is long range and can be used to either wall you off or keep you in a slow field. So she does really have great tools to initiate. Crowd control, she gets a 3 out of 5. She has a slow on her ultimate, and then she has a silence and a deafen, which silence is obviously a great CC, but it's close range for her and it only happens after a channel. So just a 3 out of 5 there for crowd control. Damage, she gets 5 out of 5. Her damage output is pretty insane. She has 2 charges on her ult, and both of those ults, it seems like they do Anubis numbers as far as damage. So she can have insane damage numbers. Flexibility, she gets a 2 out of 5. She does have a lot of damage in her kit, so you can kind of build her in a tank way if you want to, but she doesn't excel in that role, so you want to build that damage build on her. Survivability, also a 2 out of 5. You'd think being able to go into walls would help you survive in a lot of situations, but she is taking damage while in the wall kind of over time. She can't go into the wall when she's below a certain health threshold, so it's not as useful or easy for her to survive as you may think. Team fight, she gets a 4 out of 5. Her ultimate can be used to kind of wall people off or use it for area denial or keep somebody stuck in one place while you eliminate them from the team fight in general. So she does a pretty good job in the team fight aspect. So overall, I gave Cliodhna a 20 out of 30, which puts her in the A tier right next to Camazotz and Bastet. The next assassin on our list is Dodgy. Dodgy, I gave a 3 out of 5 in initiation. She has the ability to teleport to enemy or allied gods, which can be used to start a fight. She also has her Powwow, which is a really good form of initiation, but it's a little hard to hit that without anybody else on your team helping you, so I just gave her a 3 out of 5 in initiation there. Crowd control, also a 3 out of 5. Most of her crowd control relying on her Powwow again, a chain, a slow, a pull, and then into a stun. So that's 4 crowd controls on one ability. Good crowd control, she has a slow on her 1, I believe, as well, but kind of hard to confirm, so I just gave her a 3. Damage, 3 out of 5. She does have good bleed damage, kind of tick damage over time, and a little bit of burst damage if you can hit what you need to right away, but she just can't do that effectively enough by herself, so just kind of a 3 out of 5 on that score. Flexibility, another 3 out of 5. She can't build super tanky because she needs to have that high damage output, and she really wants to be that like eliminate one person from the fight type of god and can't necessarily kite or be a bruiser as much as other assassins. Survivability, 2 out of 5. She has the teleport. She does have a knock-up immunity and some CC immunity in her 2 and on her ultimate, but if you're using it that way, really not the best, so it gets a 2 out of 5 in that category. Team fight, I did give her a 4 out of 5, just basically solely for the reason that she has her ultimate, her Powwow. She can go up into that, and if she does get 2 or 3 of the enemy gods successfully chained and pulled back, it's basically an Ares ult, just as effective as an Ares ult. It's harder to hit, but if she can hit those, it is insane setup for the rest of your team to finish off a fight. So overall, Dodgy gets an 18 out of 30, which puts her in the B tier. She has an okay kit for Joust, just doesn't quite do enough by herself. Next up on our assassin tier list is Fenrir. Fenrir gets a 4 out of 5 in initiation. He can use 3 of his 4 abilities to initiate very effectively between a stun, a brutalize, which follows enemies kind of anywhere they go, and then obviously the ultimate, which we'll continue to talk about throughout the rest of this little section. Crowd control, he gets a 3 out of 5. He has a stun on his jump as long as his runes are active, and then the ultimate, which can literally take anybody and put them anywhere you want to, essentially putting them out of position. So really good CCs, just not necessarily very many of them. Damage, he gets a 4 out of 5. He does have a power buff and scaling built into his kit. He can basically 100 to 0 a mage once he gets online. Does a ton of damage very effectively, and enemies can't really get away from it very easily either. Flexibility, he gets a 5 out of 5. He can be built literally any way you want and played any style you want to. He can be the full damage burst assassin all the way to the only support style on your team. So he has the flexibility in his kit that he can do really whatever he wants in Joust. Survivability, 4 out of 5. Has a leap that can get over walls. His brutalize is also a short leap that can help you out in situations. Ultimate is CC immune, and he gets speed and can just run away in very, very emergency situations. So I gave him a 4 out of 5 in survivability because he can basically get out of anything that he wants to. Team fight also gets a 4 out of 5. Has a stun that can set up for your teammates. Has a brutalize that can do a ton of damage to set up for your teammates to finish off a kill. And then obviously the game changer, his ultimate, where he can go pull whoever he wants out of position and put them somewhere that your teammates can follow up on. So kind of a very unique assassin in that way, which is why I gave him such a high number. All of those scores put together gives Fenrir a 24 out of 30, which puts him in our S tier. He's our first assassin there. He is one of the absolute best assassins in Joust for any situation. The next assassin on our list is Hun Batz. I gave Hun Batz a 3 out of 5 in initiation. He does have multiple tools that he can use to initiate, but his 1 is a little bit of a wind up so the enemies know it's coming. The 3, if you have to use it, your enemies know that the monkey is out, so they can get away from it. And then if he can't use those 2 things effectively, he can't really get close to you to use his ultimate to initiate either. So for those reasons, I just gave him a 3. Crowd control, also gave him a 3 out of 5. He does have up to a 40% slow on his leap, which is really good. Kind of hard to confirm, like I said before. And then the ultimate has an amazing form of crowd control, the fear for up to 2 seconds, but not all that easy to confirm either. Damage, I gave him a 3 out of 5. He can do a ton of damage in a short amount of time, but everything he does is just a little bit telegraphed. The 1 has a long windup, the 2 even has a long windup, and that's just purely damage. So if your enemies can avoid that, he can't really get the damage output that a lot of other assassins can. Flexibility, I gave him a 2 out of 5. He doesn't really fit any role other than a high damage assassin. He can build a little bit bruiser-ish, but you really want to have that all-in 100 to 0 type of style. Survivability, I gave him a 3 out of 5. He has a leap that he can get over walls, and then he does have a fear that can kind of get you out of some situations that you need to, but that's not really how you want to use that either. Team fight is really his X factor. I gave him a 5 out of 5 here, mostly just for the fact of his ultimate. If he can hit a 2 to 3 person ult and his entire team is feared for a full 2 seconds, that can turn the entire tide of a team fight or a game. So really one of the absolute best assassins as far as team fight kit goes. All of these scores added up total 19 out of 30, so that puts Hun Batz right in our A tier. Next up on our assassin list, we have Kali. Kali I gave a 3 out of 5 at initiation. She does have a leap that does a lot of damage. She has a stun on her incense that can stop enemies in their tracks, and then she can really just walk up, and if she has her ultimate, she can walk up and start fighting. So pretty good initiation tools and kind of different ways to use them. So overall 3 out of 5 there. CC I gave her a 1 out of 5. The only real hard crowd control she has is on her 3, and it's a pretty small area around her, so she has to kind of make herself a little bit vulnerable to hit that crowd control. Not great on the crowd control side for Kali. Damage, she gets a 4 out of 5. She is probably most well known for her just pure damage output among maybe all of the assassins, so if she hits everything as she needs to and can stick to somebody, she can do a whole ton of damage. Flexibility, I gave her a 2 out of 5. She really wants to be that full damage style assassin. She already has decent enough survivability, which we'll talk about in the next section, that she doesn't necessarily fit those other bruiser roles. Speaking of survivability, I gave her a 4 out of 5 in this category. She can leap over walls if she needs to. She can stun enemies that are diving her if she needs to. And then obviously kind of the X factor on her ultimate, where she does have literal immunity to death for a short while. So in any situation, she can kind of survive if she needs to. Team fight, I gave her a 2 out of 5. She's more of a singling a enemy target out style of god. She has the stun that can maybe set up for teammates, but that's really it. So she doesn't excel in that style or that part of her game. All of these scores put together give Kali a 16 out of 30, which puts her in the B tier. Next up, we have everybody's favorite assassin, Loki. Loki I gave a 4 out of 5 in initiation. I think his invisibility, being a very unique part of his kit, similar to Cliodhna, can surprise people, and if they're on the back foot, that kind of puts you at an advantage in Joust. His blind on his 2 also has great disorienting factors and can allow you or teammates to initiate a fight effectively. And then his ultimate is kind of a long range initiation tool as well. So he has more tools and better tools to me than I think the average assassin has. Crowd control, I gave him a 3 out of 5. Has the cripple and stun on his ultimate, which are both good abilities or CCs. And then blind, I think, is an underrated CC in general. It's not considered a hard CC, but the fact that your enemies can't see what they're doing allows you to avoid being damaged by abilities. It allows the enemy team to not coordinate as effectively. So I do think that he does have some good forms of CC. Damage, I gave him a 4 out of 5. He does a ton of damage in a short amount of time. If you can get behind the enemy team, he does even more damage. He's one of those 100-0 style assassins that can just output damage like crazy. Flexibility, I gave him a 3 out of 5. He can build bruiser surprisingly well. The only thing that he lacks as far as kind of that real backline tanky style is a ton of forms of hard CC. So for that reason, I just gave him a 3. Survivability, I also gave Loki a 3 out of 5. His invisibility can lead to some interesting misdirection and outplays, but aside from that, the ultimate is really his only way to safely get away from fights. Team fight, also gave him a 3 out of 5. His kit really allows for that kind of eliminating one person from the enemy team and doesn't set your team up for success really in any way outside of maybe the stun on one person, but overall, not a great team fight style assassin. Loki's total score is a 20 out of 30, which puts him in the A tier. Mercury is the next assassin on our tier list today. I gave Mercury a 3 out of 5 in initiation. He does have his ultimate that can be wound up all the way across the map, or close range if you want to hit somebody just right there in front of you. He does have special delivery, which is also a pretty decent initiation tool, or he can initiate with his Mage Look and crit 1 or 2 people just right off the bat to start those fights. I gave him a 2 out of 5 in crowd control. He does have the CC on his ultimate and on special delivery, but it's not that easy to confirm on the ultimate to use correctly, and then it's just a single target CC on his special delivery. So just not quite enough to bump him up to that 3 range. Damage, he gets a 4 out of 5. His passive does scale with movement, so he can build other things and not go straight damage and still do a ton of that damage kind of passively in other ways. So he has a lot of ways that he can punish you and just beat on you until you're dead. Flexibility, I gave him a 3 out of 5. Like I said, his passive allows him to scale off of movement, so you can build him kind of tanky and still get a lot of the benefit from having more power as well. Survivability, I gave him a 3 out of 5. His ultimate is, although it's a channeling ability, he can just fly out of anywhere if he really needs to. He can cleanse himself from slows. He can CC the enemy and throw them away from him if he needs to as well. And just his flexibility allows him to survive a little bit longer as well. Team fight, I gave him a 3 out of 5. Kind of more of a disorienting factor than setting your whole team up for a giant ability or anything like that, but he can really take the attention away from your other 2 teammates, which does give him a pretty good team fight. So all these things put together gives him a total of 17 out of 30, which puts him in the B tier. Naja is the next assassin on our tier list today. I gave Naja a 4 out of 5 in initiation. His ring toss can chunk the enemies and let your teammates follow up on that. Sash obviously pulls them out of position so that your teammates can attack that single target. And then his ultimate also can banish somebody from a fight, so your teammates can either decide to isolate that person down when they come down from the banish, or decide to fight other enemies on the team. Crowd control also gave him a 4 out of 5. A bouncing slow that can hit multiple enemies is a really good tool. He can also use it to escape himself or save his teammates. A sash that pulls somebody towards you from the enemy team, puts them out of position. And then banish being, again, the ability that can remove somebody from the entire battlefield is very, very powerful. Damage, he gets a 3 out of 5. He can do a good amount of damage, not an insane amount like some of the other assassins, but enough to really impact those team fights and be better than average. Flexibility, he gets a 5 out of 5. You can really play Naja any way you want. Full damage, you can go hybrid, you can go almost a purely support build if you're good at hitting some of his abilities. So he is one of the most flexible assassins in the Joust game mode. Survivability, though, he gets a 3 out of 5. If you miss his ring toss and you don't hit the slow, there's really no way for you to get away from an enemy that's chasing you. He can use his ult to get away, but you don't really want to do that. He is not as survivable as some of the other assassins. Team fight, he gets a 4 out of 5. Kind of for the reasons I had talked about before. He has so many ways that he can impact a team fight, whether it's putting a guardian up and a banish so that your teammates can follow up on the 2 squishy targets if you're playing like a guardian mage hunter comp, or he can actually just take up the mage and then your teammates can wait till that mage comes down and then burst that mage down and kill them. So because of just Naja's pure flexibility and kind of ability to do anything, he gets a 23 out of 30, which puts him in the S tier right next to Fenrir. Next up, we have Nemesis. Nemesis, I gave a 3 out of 5 in initiation. She does have a long dash that she can chain together again, so she can really get on those priority targets right away and then hit them with the slow. She can also initiate with her ultimate, especially onto kind of tanky opponents, as a great way to push them out of the team fight kind of before it even starts. So she does have a couple of those options that work really well to initiate fights. Crowd control, I gave her a 2 out of 5. She just has a couple weaker crowd control built into her kit as far as like just being slows. So she does have good slows, but compared to other CC abilities, it's just not that good for an assassin. Damage, she gets a 3 out of 5. She can do a really good amount of damage. She has to be that like in your face assassin, and then she can just jump out with her 1 and survive with her 3, but she does a good amount of damage with all her abilities. Flexibility, she gets a 3 out of 5. You can build her kind of most ways if you want to, but she doesn't work really as well as some of these other assassins when you build her full tank or hybrid. Survivability, she gets a 4 out of 5. She has the long chain dash. She has a temporary shield on her 3, which can help her get out of trouble. And then she has the stealing protections on her ultimate if she really needs that as well. So Nemesis may be one of the most safe assassins that you can play. Team fight, I gave her a 3 out of 5. That's just because she doesn't have a giant like team multiple enemy affecting ability. She can eliminate one person kind of from the fight, but she really needs to really stick on that one person to make an impact in the team fight itself. So for all of these reasons, she kind of does everything basically average, which is why I gave her an 18 out of 30, which puts her in the B tier. Pele is the next assassin on our tier list today. I gave Pele a 1 out of 5 in initiation. She does have the ability to speed herself up with one of her abilities, and she can dash in with her ultimate to initiate, but both of those things are so telegraphed in Joust that it's hard for her to do what she wants to do to start those team fights. In a jungle situation where she can isolate one person, she's a lot better, but in this mode specifically, she just has a really hard time doing what she wants to do as far as initiating those team fights. Crowd control, she gets a 3 out of 5. She does have a knock-up. She has to be close to the enemy to kind of make that work, but knock-ups are always a really strong CC. She also has a slow on her ultimate that she can hit on an enemy and really just take kind of that person and make them be the center of attention for the team. Damage, she gets a 3 out of 5. She does do a ton of damage. Again, it kind of takes a lot for her to get into the space where she can do that damage and then really consistently pump it out, but she does have really good damage numbers if she can stick to that person long enough. Flexibility, she gets a 2 out of 5. She really wants to be that full damage assassin, and building her in any other way kind of hinders what she's meant to do in Joust. Survivability, I gave her a 3 out of 5. She does have a ton of life still built into her kit. She gets a ton of speed that she can run away if she has to. And then lastly, she has an ultimate that she can use to get away in emergency situations. Team fight, I gave her a 3 out of 5 as well. She can really be a disruptor if she's in close to the enemies and they stick close to her, but a lot of that is really dependent on how close you can stay to the enemies, and with so much CC in Joust on the other team, a lot of times she struggles. So for all of these reasons put together, I gave her a 15 out of 30, which unfortunately puts Pele in the C tier. Ratatoskr is the next assassin on our list today. I gave Rat a 2 out of 5 in initiation. He has a kind of a short range dash. He can also initiate with acorns, but that has to be pretty close for him to hit. It's hard because he's also flexible in the ways that he can build his acorns, but in most situations he doesn't have that great of initiation unless he's using his ult for it, and even that is fairly telegraphed. The enemy can see you up there, so they have the ability to back off or get away before you can really initiate super effectively. I gave him a 3 out of 5 in crowd control. He does have a stun on his 3, he has a slow on the dart, and then his ultimate has the ability to knock people up, which is always a very strong CC in Joust. Damage, he gets a 3 out of 5. Again, somewhat dependent on the ability of which acorn you choose, but he can make a lot of damage happen, especially with the prot shred on his 2 if he gets close enough as well. Flexibility, he gets a 3 out of 5. You can build him in a lot of different ways. Going back to the acorns again, depending on which acorn you build, can kind of make whatever build path you want happen. He doesn't always do the super tanky builds insanely well, so I just gave him a 3 there. And then survivability, I gave him a 4 out of 5. pretty much simply for his ultimate being a get out of jail free card. At any point he can get up there onto the world tree and go 270 units away and just book it out of the fight if he really needs to. Team fight, he gets a 3 out of 5. Protection shred is a really good thing to have in a team fight. It can allow you to burst the enemy team down quickly, and Rat has that. He also has the ability to finish people off at a long distance with his ultimate, or initiate in certain situations with his ultimate and get multiple people in a knockup, which sets your team up for that nice little follow-up. So for all these scores put together, Rat gets an 18 out of 30, which puts him in the B tier. Next up, we have Ravana. Ravana, I gave a 2 out of 5 when it comes to initiation. You kind of have to either walk up and start auto-attacking your enemies to start a fight, or you're ulting in, which neither one of those are very good options in Joust. You just get too isolated and you can get poked down pretty easily. Crowd control, I also gave him a 2 out of 5. He only has 2 different types of crowd control in his kit, a slow and a root. The slow is pretty short range. It can affect multiple enemies, but the root is not only short range, it's a single enemy, and both of those types of CC can get basically eliminated if somebody has a leap, so not very strong CC on Ravana. Damage, he does get a 3 out of 5. If he can isolate somebody, one person, for any length of time, he can really just beat on them with auto attacks and do a good amount of damage in a short time. Flexibility, I gave him a 3 out of 5 because he does have some healing in his kit, he does have some movement speed in his kit, he does have some of these things that allow him to flex into multiple roles, and you can build him pretty variably depending on what you really want to accomplish. Survivability, I gave Ravana a 4 out of 5. His 2 overhead kick is literally a immunity for 1 second. It is a long cooldown, so you kind of have to be careful when you use it, but he also has healing in his kit. He also has a ton of damage mitigation in his kit. He has a decently long range leap on his ult if he really needs to get out of a fight too, so he kind of has a lot of ways that he can survive. And then lastly, I gave him a 1 out of 5 in team fight. I kind of mentioned it before, but almost everything he does is single target, short range based, which doesn't really lend itself to an effective Joust teammate. He can get one person and isolate them, but if he's doing that, he's going to get jumped on by the other 2, or that one person is going to have a way to get away from him. So all of these scores combined give Ravana a 15 out of 30, which puts him in our C tier. Next up, we have Serqet. Serqet is a little bit of a sneaky assassin. I think she gets a 4 out of 5 in initiation. She has the long range dash on her 1 that can get her to the backline if she needs to. She has an invisibility into a jump that she can jump over walls and initiate fights. She can use her taunt / madness, which is like the Discordia type effect, to get 2 enemies fighting each other. And then lastly, her ultimate, she can just put on one person and push them into your team or back into the enemy team to do more damage. So pretty much every single one of her abilities is somewhat of an effective way to initiate a fight. Crowd control also gave her a 4 out of 5. Not a ton of ways that she can use crowd control, but the taunt effect on her Cobra's Kiss, along with the madness effect that makes the enemy team fight each other and not fight you, is a lot of disruption into a team. Not to mention her ultimate, where she can isolate one person, push them 30 units in any direction that she wants to set them up for your team to follow up on. Just some really, really good CC options for the Joust game mode. Damage, I gave her a 3 out of 5. She can do a lot of damage, but it comes with a lot of qualifiers. Her passive allows her to do 10% of a target's physical health or 20% of a target's physical health as damage based on how many poisons she applies, but that's not always that guaranteed. Flexibility, I gave her a 4 out of 5. She's one of the only assassins I feel that you can build literally up to like a full tank and still be effective, all the way down to you can build full damage too if you really want to try to burst somebody down, and you have the safety to get out if you really need to. So one of the most flexible assassins out there. Survivability, also 4 out of 5. Mentioned it before with the mobility on the dash. It's a really, really far dash. She can jump over walls. She can go invisible, so the enemies can't see her, and then also she can ult and push somebody away if she really needs to survive too. So a lot of ways for her to stay safe in Joust. Team fight, I gave her a 2 out of 5. Her ability to isolate one person is really the only real team fight advantage she has. She doesn't have a lot of ways to CC many multiple people or the entire team at once. So not a huge team fight god in Joust. All these scores put together give Serqet a 21 out of 30, which puts her in the upper echelon of the A tier. Next up, we have Set. Set I gave a 4 out of 5 when it comes to initiation. He can initiate with his 1 when it comes to just doing damage to somebody. It does a ton of damage. He can also teleport to that god using his 2 and then Sandstorm. He can also just run up with his ultimate if he needs to, because he gets a ton of movement speed in his passive. So a lot of ways to start those fights off pretty effectively for Set. Crowd control, I gave him a 2 out of 5. He really doesn't have amazing crowd control. He has a 25% slow on his skewer, the 1, and then he has kind of a vision cloudiness type of CC on his Sandstorm, but outside of that, not very strong CC abilities for Set. Damage, on the other hand, I gave him a 5 out of 5. If you've ever played him in Joust, you know how quickly he can burst somebody down without you having a chance to even defend yourself or defend your teammate. Kingslayer mixed with Relentless, mixed with the Skewer is just an insane amount of damage in a very short amount of time. So if you're looking for one of those high damage, quick burst assassins, Set is maybe the best one. Flexibility, I gave Set a 3 out of 5. Because of his passive, he does get movement speed. So you can build him in a bunch of different ways and still do a ton of damage. So he is a fairly flexible assassin. Survivability, I gave him a 4 out of 5. He has the ability to teleport over walls or away from the enemy if he needs to. And then his ultimate, even though it's not necessarily a getaway skill, the health restoration on it that he gets is very insane. So he can use his ultimate to kind of sustain enough to buy enough time to get out of a fight if he needs to. Lastly, team fight, I gave him a 4 out of 5, and that's just mostly because of the pure damage numbers he's able to put out in a short amount of time in not necessarily an area, but if he has Kingslayer active, the other team really can't fight within that, otherwise they're not going to win that team fight. So he does have a giant impact on team fights in Joust. Overall, Set gets a 22 out of 30, which makes him the 3rd god in our S tier. Susano is the next assassin on our list. For initiation, I gave Susano a 3 out of 5. He does have a dash that can get him close to the enemies. Wind Siphon has the ability to pull an enemy out of position, and then he does have his teleport and his ultimate, which can all be used for initiation, but they're also kind of conditional, so they're not as effectively used as often as some other initiation tools for other gods. Crowd control, a 3 out of 5. The Wind Siphon acts as sort of a knock-up / pull type CC, and then the ultimate in a giant area works as a vortex that grows into a knock-up, and knock-up is one of the most effective forms of CC, but similar to initiation, some of the things that he has to do to use his CC abilities are just so conditional that it's hard for Susano to use them optimally in Joust. Damage, he gets a 4 out of 5. Definitely one of the burstier assassins. He has a lot of abilities that do a lot of damage, and his passive allows him to do bonus damage based on physical power. So he is probably one of the highest damage assassins in the game. Flexibility, 2 out of 5. However, I don't think he works that well in any sort of capacity other than that high burst assassin, which doesn't make him that useful in the Joust game mode, unfortunately, because he can get isolated. Partially the reason why I gave him a 2 out of 5 in survivability as well. His teleport can't go around walls, he can't dash around walls, so you are able to just stop him from doing what he wants to do with any sort of wall in your kit. Team fight, he gets a 3 out of 5. He can pull an enemy out of position with Wind Siphon. The ultimate is a really large ability that has a ton of potential for disruption as well. So he can be effective in those team fights as a whole team. Overall, Susano gets a 17 out of 30, which puts him in our B tier. Thanatos is the next god on our list. For initiation, I gave Thanatos a 2 out of 5. His Sai is a good initiation tool on a single target, but it's not that easy to hit. Silence, he has to kind of walk up to initiate those fights, and you can obviously initiate with his ultimate, but you have to be very, very careful in doing so, and it's really not the most optimal way to use it. Crowd control, I gave him a 3 out of 5. He has a 20% slow on his Sai. He has silence on his Soul Reap ability, 1 second duration, so that's a pretty good duration there. He has a stun on his ultimate, but again, you don't really want to use it for the stun. A lot of times you're trying to use it for that execute threshold, so good CC tools, but can't always use them how you'd expect. Damage, he gets a 4 out of 5. He has percent damage built into his kit, which is always great for things like tanks, and then having an execute with a 40% health threshold is obviously pretty insane. You don't have to do that much, your teammates don't have to do that much to set you up to get that final finishing blow. Flexibility, I gave him a 2 out of 5. I don't think he does enough if you don't build him kind of full damage, and I don't think he's that survivable even when he does go full damage, so I think he just struggles in a 3v3 game mode where he can't isolate somebody from the fight completely in a jungle setting. Survivability, also gave him a 2 out of 5. He obviously has a ton of lifesteal abilities built into his kit, but the fact that his only real true escape is his ultimate just really hurts him, and if you're using his ultimate to escape, that's not what the Thanatos is really there for. Team fight, he gets a 2 out of 5. Ton of damage, like I said before, but a lot of it is so single target based that it doesn't really help you out as a team. You can ult in and stun multiple members, but pretty much with everything else I've said too, that's not really the way that you want Thanatos ult to be used. So overall, Thanatos gets a 15 out of 30, which puts him in the C tier. Next up on our assassin tier list is Thor. For Thor, I gave him a 3 out of 5 when it comes to initiation. He can do a lot of damage if he throws his 1 out, his hammer, and back. If he hits both of those ticks. He has a 70 unit wall that can be used to wall people off or to stun them, and then also his ultimate can be used for initiation, and his teleport can be used for initiation. So got a lot of tools to get that fight started. Crowd control, I gave Thor a 3 out of 5. He does have a stun on the wall. He also has the ability to wall somebody off and keep them from going somewhere, so that is technically a form of CC as well. And then his ultimate is a multi-person stun that is fairly telegraphed, so not an insane amount of CC in his kit, but good enough to be effective in Joust. I gave Thor 3 out of 5 when it comes to damage. His 1, the hammer toss ability, is really good if you can hit both procs, but that's not super easy. And then his 3, his spin, does a lot of damage as well, but a lot of people are going to be able to get out of that before the full damage goes off. So pretty decent damage numbers, but not so confirmable, which is why I gave him a 3. Flexibility also gets a 3 out of 5. Due to his passive, he gets more power when there are more enemy gods around him. In Joust specifically, you're always basically going to be around that team fight with 3 enemies close to you, so you are able to build a little bit tanky or build in a few more different ways and still do decent enough damage. Survivability, I gave Thor a 3 out of 5 here too. With his hammer, he can teleport to it, over walls or through walls to get away from a chasing enemy. He also has his ultimate, which is a super far getaway ability if he really, really needs to use it that way. Team fight, he gets a 3 out of 5. He has the multiple person stun on his ultimate. He can wall people off or isolate one person from their teammates, which allows for some nice team play ability. Thor gets 3s across the board, pretty average on everything, but doesn't excel in any specific place, so that gives him an 18 out of 30, which puts him in our B tier. Last but not least, we have Tsukiyomi. For Tsukiyomi, I gave him a 3 out of 5 in initiation, and in my opinion, that mostly comes from his ability to poke the enemy team down with his long range basics, which is very, very unique for an assassin. He can also throw his caltrops down, which are a slow, or he can start a fight off with his ultimate, which does a ton of damage in a short amount of time, and then he's in on the enemies just right away. So it's a good way to start a fight if you're confident enough using Suki. Crowd control, I gave Tsukiyomi a 2 out of 5. He does have a disarm as well as a stun on his 2 ability, but it's pretty close range and you kind of have to walk up to the enemies to really hit that, which isn't always what you want to be doing with Suki since he doesn't have a consistent movement ability. And then he has a slow on his caltrops as well, which is not a heavy form of CC either. Damage, I gave Suki a 5 out of 5. He is one of the most consistently high damage output assassins, in my opinion. The ability to spam his abilities and then follow that up with long range autos is just so unique and so much better for assassins in Joust specifically. So that mixed with his ultimate that can hit multiple enemies multiple times really puts Suki in kind of a class of his own, along with Set, I would say, as far as how much damage he can deal out. Because of how high his damage is, I feel that he is very flexible in the way that you can build him or use him as well. So I gave him a 4 out of 5 in flexibility just because of those high power numbers being allowing him to build into any other items that kind of suit your needs. Survivability, though, I gave him a 2 out of 5. I mentioned this before, but he doesn't have any real movement abilities. He has some movement speed steal on his 1, and then he also has a 25% I think stim on his 2, so he can get away using those 2 things, but it's not really that consistent. He can't get over walls, and if he uses his ultimate, it's pretty easy for the enemy team to see where he's going to end up, so he can get jumped on pretty easily after that. Team fight, I gave him a 4 out of 5. He can really be that disruption factor. If he ults in, he's proccing multiple hits on multiple enemies and doing damage to everyone on the team, which is obviously really good for team fights. It helps your teammates to just follow up and kind of finish those kills off, or you finish them off yourself if you need to. So all of these scores put together give Tsukiyomi a 20 out of 30, which puts him in the A tier. There you have it. That is my assassin tier list for the Joust game mode based on their kit. So itemization may change, but unless anything in their kit fundamentally changes, these gods are going to be strong in this game mode or weak in this game mode according to this tier list. If you disagree, please comment below. I want to hear your opinion. If you enjoyed or you learned something, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. Follow me on Twitch. If you are one of my first 100 Twitch followers, you will be entered in to win $60 worth of video games or a video game, however you would like to spend it if you're the person chosen. So make sure you head to my Twitch and follow me there, and you'll be automatically entered to win. Thank you guys so much for hanging out.